All right. Hello. Welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome. Welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness. Welcome to Bubble Time. Um, Happy New Year. How has your new year been feeling so far? I just like to kind of invite everybody who's watching to just kind of drop into your body, notice how you're feeling, drop into the heart. See if you can feel a space of gratitude in there for whatever it might be. I'm bringing this up because it is so important for us to be in that state of coherence as often as possible. There's a lot going on as a human. Have you guys noticed? And some days are just easier than others. Some days are harder than others. And it seems like there's so much happening in the way of inner awareness happening, going through life reviews, kind of expectations around our future, letting go of the past. And, while we are navigating this life, part of our navigation, well, our main navigation tool should be our heart, not just our head, not just our brain, but how do we feel? Because more and more, I just dove right in. That's kind of the energy update, basically. It's the more and more we're opening up to different levels of communication, different levels and layers of being able to interpret our environment in order to communicate with our higher aspects, our higher selves, our guides, whatever we want to label that higher communication that each of us has access to and that looks different for everyone, but it feels a certain way. And more I get asked, there's still a group of people out there who think what I do is unique. And my style in which I do it may be unique. But we all have the ability to tune into our intuition, into us, into our own system. And that's one of the biggest messages is that how we each do it on an individual layer is up to us. But it starts with us being able to feel. If we're disconnected from our feelings, or we're so caught up in our emotions that we have difficulty differentiating between feeling anxiety because we have something exciting happening in our lives, or feeling anxious because we have something scary going on in our lives. Those are the differentiation pieces, or the pieces that we need to be able to differentiate in order to use discernment moving forward in this new year, in order to recognize the truth in certain scenarios and conversations and disclosures that are happening, and so on and so forth. So that was the biggest message of the year, that my guides are like, you gotta tap into those feelings and recognize what we're feeling, what we're associating those feelings with. And again, differentiating between highs and lows, and oh, this is maybe because of that reason, and this is because of that reason, rather than just lumping everything into feeling anxious. I'm bringing this up because we have a lot of solar activity going on. We have a lot of earth changes ongoing. Many of us are having Kundalini activations, which are bringing up life reviews, which are bringing up memories of our past in this lifetime and other lifetimes, which can churn up and stir up emotions. And those emotions are then sometimes percolating in our bodies, and we feel a certain way because all of this stuff is happening. And if we can stop and say, wow, I'm feeling, fill in the blanks, whatever that is right now, allow ourselves to feel it and not necessarily become emotionally attached to that feeling. It's going to help us kind of move through this next year of disclosure, of changing how we communicate with each other, of processing our emotions and things like that in a much more fluid and dynamic way. I hope that made sense. I kind of just jumped right into it. So I'd love to go into a little flow with the guides and see what they have to share about all of this. I had been asking some questions around time. But let's see and I'm still a little under the weather. I had something else to keep in mind. I'm going to pause for a moment. Was a little under the weather at the holidays. So many people I know have been under the weather. And it's kind of, there's stuff going on that we're beginning to become aware of regarding our health. And I want to go into that maybe in a little bit more detail in another video, but we'll see what the guides have to share with all of this. One message I wanted to share with that is don't beat yourself up. If you're going through something and you feel like I shouldn't be sick right now, I've got too much to do, or I've been doing everything right, how come I'm under the weather? All these things. It's like, let go of the need. I'm hearing let go of the blame game. We don't need to blame ourselves. We don't have to blame anybody. It just is what it is sometimes. And the guides are kind of saying, if we can be in that space of like, okay, well, this is maybe why we're feeling this way, but not turning that into pointing the finger or blaming or getting angry. That's another level and layer of what the guides were kind of like, be aware of that. Okay. And so in the coming year for 2025, the trajectory, if you will, the branches that we see branching out from this reality, from this observation point, from this point where we are standing still, the still point in which we see the directions and multi-universal energy and multi-dimensionality that flows into and through all things. We see many different points of regulations, we'll say, or many different regulations that will come forward as we begin to shift our direction, and we'll play with this a bit. We are accessing, as we share these messages, a central space, if you will. And this central space holds within it a concoction or a chemical exchange that allows us to look at the potential programs that are being submitted now through thought forms, deeds, actions, feelings, emotions, probabilities. And we would venture to say that all of those things just listed are what creates the probabilities in this time machine that we call our now moment, or the 2025 projections, if you will. And yet, because each of us is now opening into a space of more, we are recognizing more, we are sensing more, we are using more of our senses to essentially turn the tables and turn the tides of time. Therefore, much that we might be able to see will change with the fluidity of the new human. And so we would be doing a disservice to ourselves and with each other to potentially lock ourselves into a particular outcome. And yes, while there are many different outcomes or trajectories or potentials that are lining up for us in the future of the now moment, we always invite you to stop and go back within to recognize that you are the future in the now of this moment. And so therefore, what you are projecting, what you are sending out, the signals that you are sending out are what is creating the future reality. So if you are listening to someone who is projecting a reality full of fear and isolation, and many different memories come up that are attached to those feeling of fear projections, it enhances the probability of that landscape being docked into the station, if you will, being docked into what you line up with. And so we invite everybody to step away from the indoctrination that happens through us tuning into particular influencing programs. And so we are referencing stories, television shows, newspaper articles, thought programming that has been, let us say, pieced into our puzzle our thinking holographic imprint for quite some time. We would invite you to start to reorganize what you imprint onto and what imprints onto you. And we play with this because until something is placed in print, I'm seeing like we don't believe it until we see it kind of thing. But if we're seeing it from our projector, we are imprinting it into the holographic experience that each of us is interacting with and through. And so as we begin to see that we have more power at our disposal than we have been told, we have felt, we have thought in the past, we begin to reorganize these sketches and we let go of these sketchy diagrams that make us feel off course, that make us feel as if we are being pressured into something we don't want. When in actuality, we are the ones printing out the false programming when we imprint or allow it to imprint on us. So I'm being called to play with this for a little bit. It's interesting. Hold on just a second. So I'm really being called to play with the word imprint because it's a double, triple, quadruple meaning, as is much of the stuff that I share in flow. And what I was called to say, first of all, of course, if you imprint on something, you're leaving a mark, right? So you're leaving a mark, let's say, of something onto something else. But I was called to specifically look up, and of course, if you print something, it comes out of nothing, it uses the ink, and it prints what it is that we're reading. Now, I was called to look up DNA. And so in DNA, imprinting refers to the process of marking a gene with the parent of origin. It also has to do with epigenetic markers and such. Ooh, this is very interesting. I feel like this is relevant to what it has to do with chemical modification of a DNA sequence. Ooh, I want to play with this. So, genomic imprinting is the process by which only one copy of a gene is an individual, while the other copy is suppressed. I feel like I want to play with this because it says the DNA sequence is not changing. Wow. Initially, it was thought that all inheritance is based on changes in the sequence. This turns out not to be true. In one of these mechanisms, which is not involved in change of sequence, but rather is an inherited chemical change to a DNA sequence, is referred to as imprinting. Okay. So part of this is a play on words. And what I'm being shown is and this is not literal. By the way, I'm on genome.gov, National Human Genome Research Institute, to get that information. But okay, I'm being called to keep reading about that. So initially it was thought that all inheritance is based on changes in sequence. It turns out not to be true. In one of those mechanisms, which is not involved in change of sequence, but rather an inherited chemical change to a DNA sequence, is referred to as imprinting. And that imprinting, the reason it's important, that chemical modification passed on from the mother or the father to the offspring changes the function of the gene or the gene product, whether it's expression or actually the function of the gene product itself. Now, what I'm being called to play with is that the guides are constantly talking about our chemicals changing in our bodies. And I have a feeling this is imprinting into the field. And I want to go into this a little deeper and maybe play with that with the guides. But my dear friend and sister, Kat, and I were talking the other day about, actually we were talking about, what is his name? Everybody's Joe Dispenza. And I have not gone into a deep dive with Joe Dispenza. She's been participating in some of his meditations and such and just raving about how great his work is. By the way, I highly recommend check him out if you haven't. He's got some incredible work that he's done. And we went into a little channeling. She was asking some questions and I was answering while I was in flow. And essentially, what the guides are saying is when you do this kind of work, you are changing the chemicals in your body. So, if you, and this, what I'm seeing is a connection here, a multidimensional meaning. When we change the human connections in the body and the chemical system responds accordingly, we are actually having an impact on our future generations. And so this goes back to what the guides were saying at the beginning of this video, which is we are the future. Now, that's so many different ways of looking at it. How we are responding now to our environment, to each other, the interactions that we're having is creating and having an impact, a ripple effect in the field, the soup of time. And that's not exact, it's beyond time. It's all quantum. It's happening now. So you are quantumly entangled with the you of the future. Of course, you're the same person. But as you shift and change, you're having an impact on the field of the human collective genome that is only one through source frequency, the energy, the spirit that moves through all things. So we are all each impacting each other and the whole, community of this quantum entangled web that we are all weaving and creating and co-creating together. We are the creators, we are the spiders, we are the ones who are the cells inside the body and the collective body of the energy of the frequency in which we all are part of. It's the oneness, right? But on an individual basis, as we shift and we change the chemicals in our body, we're evolving. We are changing how we respond genetically to things. And so what happens is it creates resources within the human template and the human structure that weren't there before, or they've always been there, but they weren't activated before, or we didn't understand them. So the guides keep saying, that everything is in front of us, everything is within us, but we have yet to discover that. And so the more we harness this coherent space that's within the heart, the more we synchronize our brain, our hemispheres of our brain, the more we work together, it changes how we work together, not only with each other, but also within our body, within our cells, within the template, the temple, the manner, the house of the human. Now, I just did a video when I was in car flow talking about use your manners, be nice to each other. We don't have to be mean to each other. Part of that is imprinting into the collective as well. So all of this is essentially, I even think this has to do, my friend Candace and Sister said that, I think we were talking about mirror neurons. That has something to do with this as well. So I just wanted to share that the sequencing changes, or the way in which the sequencing interacts with each other changes. And that has a domino effect on our cellular metabolism and how it is that we metabolize not only the proteins that are in the body, I'm just saying what's coming through, but also how it is that we communicate on a cellular network. And so it becomes more unified. It's almost like I'm seeing jumping genes, like they reorganize themselves to fit within the new template that no longer operates at the old operational, like I'm hearing the old operational manual, we've overridden it. So now we're in manual. We're like, oh, nope, I'm gonna upgrade right now. Excuse me. Frog in my throat. And so we are each on a mission, if you will. We are each of us informing our bodies of this mission. And each of us is up-leveling to some degree and to some level or variation of this intensified time, if you will. And because of this, how we interact with time, and we will go back to the bullet points earlier in regards to and around timelines. So Many of the ingredients, let us say, that were required to propose a particular chunk of time, and the ingredients that were necessary to pull us on to that particular story or timeline is now different. And so, because of that, we are coming up against a deeper period of reflection where we see things with more depth at a deeper level that we were unable to see before. This causes us to process things that we were unable to perceive before. Not only that, it causes us to perceive more of what we are processing and seeing that before would have gone unnoticed. And because of this, it is creating an entirely new division, if you will, of accessing or accessing new divisions of realities. And that's a play on words. So I'm seeing all of these branches going off that are divisions of reality, but not that we're divided into these. It's more of a unified perception of being able to see those divisions while simultaneously holding a particular direction. In addition to this, we are able to utilize more of these resources in a much more dynamic and interactive way versus an incomplete or uninitiated, okay, I'm seeing like being asleep and doing it or actually being conscious and doing it. Because we're consciously interacting in a very different way, consciously, it holds a different frequency than if we would have just been asleep at the wheel. What I'm being shown is the difference between lucid dreaming and remote viewing, or seeing things in your imagination and actually interacting with them in a lucid dream. I mean, there's just different ways of looking at it. It becomes more visceral, is what I'm hearing. And because of this visceral quality to the timelines and to how we are interacting with reality or how we view reality, it enhances our interaction with reality, which enhances the dynamic attributes that reality offers back to us. And this is difficult to explain and understand in some ways, but it is a direct reflection of our choices. It is a direct reflection and almost instantaneous experience to be had moment to moment that qualifies our experience at a much higher qualification. And I'm seeing jumping, like it jumps, we jump faster, it's bigger, stronger, faster, because all of a sudden we're more aware. So I'm hearing intelligence, the innate intelligence or genius starts to come online. And I'm being called to share an example. It's just like when you start realizing that synchronicities are happening. At first you think they're happening to you, and then you realize that it's actually you interacting with reality. And once you fall into that pattern of flow, everything becomes a kind of a magical experience that's more colorful, more vibrant, more emotional, a deeper experience. You'll have more ahas that are sustainable. And because of that, we are then enhanced. This is kind of an example of ascension. This is what we're all kind of going through at our own individual pace or level. This jumps the human ahead into a completely different quadrivium, quantitative, higher molecular display of energetic convergence. And so we might say that it creates the ability to jump timelines. Therefore, many of the different ideas or concepts that many people believe might happen or have thought were, I'm hearing, have thought and patterned into a potential directional point of view pulling us in that direction begins to fade. It begins to crack, if you will. And we begin to see through that particular timeline as a false play or potentially something that we no longer want. And because we are able to see it and view it from a much less distorted view, because we are consciously interacting from this higher perspective, we no longer create in a materialistic format such a strong compulsion or compulsory reaction to programming that pulled us into a reactionary timeline of lack of choice. And so I'm being called to play with that. So if we're not conscious, it's not that we're not choosing and making choices. We're still choosing to go along with whatever that is that we're unconsciously triggered by or programmed to believe in. We follow that, whether it's, I don't want to look, okay, I'm going to look. Or it could be, I'm seeing people marching along on with something that they believe in because that's what they've been told is real since they were born. That's not a conscious interaction, that's unconscious because that's been a program that they've basically been chewing on since they were kids. We all have them, myself included. But instead, all of a sudden, that program is going to have a glitch in it. There's going to be a crack in it. There's going to be something where we're skipping along and all of a sudden we skip and we're like, wait a minute. I don't know if I want to keep going in that direction. That doesn't seem like what I thought it was. That doesn't feel appropriate for me anymore. Something feels different about this. Something feels off. And we begin to then feel into the field a bit more and we begin to respond in a conscious choice. And so rather than us just saying, yep, I'm going to go to do this today and I'm going to do that and I'm going to follow the protocol that I've been doing, all of a sudden we go, I don't feel like doing that today. And it becomes a little bit of like the Matrix, right? We wake up from the Matrix and we make a different choice. And if more and more of us are making different choices, it becomes those timelines and those realities are less predictable. And I'm going back and ending on this note. So we become less predictable. And the guides have talked about this before. The less predictable we are, because we're following our hearts and we're being spontaneous and we're thinking for ourselves and we're saying no to certain things that maybe we never would have thought before, given it a second thought. We would have just said, okay, sign me up. Now we're like, wait a minute, what exactly am I signing up for? So what that does is it makes the programming more difficult to create for us to follow, because we're not following anymore. We're actually leading by making conscious choices and not unconscious choices based on predictive modeling and programming. So these are things that are happening as the evolution of the human is happening. And we are the ones that are in charge of that. And we've been under the belief system, I think, oftentimes that we aren't in charge of that we don't have a choice. And while in some cases it may feel that way or may seem that way, what the guides are always showing me is we do have a choice. We always have a choice. And it's just now we're becoming so much more clairvoyant, clairaudient, open, letting go, more understanding, more compassionate. And it doesn't mean that's all happening at once. But even if just one of those things happens, that has an impact on what we choose to do for our future, how we choose to move forward as a collective, as an individual, with our families, with our jobs. So it's such a big ripple effect that the actual future really isn't predictable in the way that we think it is. Now we have a whole I'll do a different video on that, because we do have a whole collective of people who are very let us say, big in the spiritual community, we'll say, that are predicting certain things to come to pass. And my guides are just like, why? Why do we need to, really put our consciousness there if that's not what we want? Just because somebody tells us, look, 2025 is going to be crazy, that doesn't mean that we're going to experience it that way. So it might seem that way on the outside, but it may never be part of our actual individual reality. So why continue to feed even that type of programming? We're really being called to get back into our own creative process. We're being called to get back into a place of, all right, well, maybe it will be, maybe it won't be. What am I here to create and to feel good about and to help cultivate in 2025 in this new world that is already here now, because I am the future me. We are the future we, right? So right now. Anyways, that was basically a little 2025 energy kind of overview of what the guides are trying to express about timelines. And I think there'll be a lot more about that. So hopefully someone found this helpful. Thank you so much for sharing these videos with others. I greatly appreciate it. And I greatly appreciate you for watching and tuning into this frequency with me. In love and light, guys. Namaste.